Johnny with Anderson Ford Motorsport here, and welcome to our next project on YouTube called Project Frostbite. This is our 2008 Shelby Mustang GT. Now, our first project that we did on the channel was called Project Everyman. That was pretty much a nice overhaul, pretty much touching the whole car front and back in regards to performance, looks, and pretty much building a nice everyday street strip car. This one here, we're going to take a little bit of a different approach. Essentially, we've got three key points that we want to cover with this car. We want performance, we want looks, and we want price. So here we are, 2024, Mustangs are out, and they're costing a good amount of money. Between a GT, a nicely equipped GT, anywhere from 50 up to a dark horse into the high 60s, maybe $70,000 for a completely tricked out one. So, yes, it is a 2008 Mustang, 4.6 liter 3-valve. Are these cars relevant anymore in 2024? Well, that's essentially the whole meaning of this project, or the whole motif, or I guess you could say theme of this project. We want to make one of these cars relevant in 2024. The way we're going to do that is by essentially building a car for half the price of a brand new Mustang. But in regards to performance, these cars, when they came out at the time, they really didn't have much of a competitor out there, so they only made like 300 horsepower to the crank. So, with this car, of course, we're going to dyno the car first, get a baseline, we got to see where our starting point is, and then we got a couple modifications we're going to do to really spruce it up. But essentially what we want to do is keep this thing streetable. This thing's a nice little cruiser car. It's got low mileage and it's in really good shape. So we don't want to do all kinds of things to it that's really going to make it undrivable or make it not fun to cruise in. So let's go ahead and get this thing on the dyno first and see our baseline, and then we'll talk about the modifications we're going to do. And there you have it. Again, not earth-shattering numbers, nothing crazy, but essentially we always start with our baseline so you know where the starting point's going to be. Now we talked to our friends over at Vortex Superchargers because essentially what we want to do is have one of these make as much horsepower as one, if not a little bit more, as a brand new Mustang. Essentially, again, keeping with our theme of building a car for half the price of a brand new one. But performance-wise, we want to be able to still keep up with the cars of the current day. So a Vortex Supercharger is a perfect way to do so because they're super reliable, installation's not that bad, and they've been around forever. We know the kind of longevity that they have, and we know it's going to make the power that we want. So we went with a polished V3 SI Supercharger kit, nicknamed the Frostbite Tuner Kit package from Anderson Ford Motorsport. It's going to run one of our power pipes with it, a set of LU47 Ford Performance injectors, and a Deechworks 340 liter per hour fuel pump. We're going to get this car custom tuned, of course, using an SCT device and software, but essentially that's where we're going with it. Now, a couple other things we're going to do, because again, we want this thing to look cool, and again, going with our theme here, and to still want it to stand out a little bit, we're going to do a couple other things that may be outside the norm a little bit. In regards to exhaust systems, we don't want this car to be obnoxious, we still want it to be a cruiser, and we don't want to really mess with the emission systems at all. So we're going to leave the stock exhaust for the most part, stock mid-pipe with the cats, and it already came with the Ford Racing mufflers as it did from the factory. But we are going to do a set of shorty headers. Now, I know what people are going to think, shorty headers don't really do much of anything, and you'd be correct. But again, we want something that looks a little bit better under the hood and will help with performance, especially with the supercharger. So we're going with a simple set of BBK ceramic coated equal length headers. And that should give us a little bit of horsepower up top, but again, it's going to look much better than the cast iron manifolds under the hood. And I know people might be thinking, well, why don't you go with a nice set of long tubes? Essentially, we want to keep that budget, again, half the price of a brand new Mustang. So essentially, we got those headers on the way, along with a couple other little odds and ends to make the engine bay look nice. Like, the valve covers themselves are not the prettiest, so we got a set of Ford Racing blue valve covers, again, to help offset some of the things under the hood. So a couple other little things here and there and stuff that we'll of course touch on once we get to it. But again, keep sticking with our theme. We want something that's going to be a fun cruiser, not affect drivability, and still have the power of today's Mustangs. So our goal for this is we're hoping to hit around 420 to 430 real-world horsepower. It is an automatic car, so numbers are going to be a little bit harder to achieve versus a manual car, and that's okay, we understand that. For reference, we did dyno a Dark Horse Mustang recently, that was manual transmission, and made 424 real-world horsepower on our dyno. So I know dynos are going to vary and stuff, but that's essentially our goal. If we can keep up with the Dark Horse of today, only spending half the money, that'd be excellent. And that's the whole point of this car. A fun little cruiser. We don't want to do anything crazy. We don't need to do long tubes. We don't need to do cams. We don't need to do any major stuff in order to keep and make one of these cars relevant today. So, of course, at the end, we'll tell you how much we spent total in this car, and then we'll, of course, show you the dyno results as well. So let's go ahead and get the car in the shop, up on the lift, and let's start working on this car with Project Frostbite. On a final note here, this project is not going to be as long as our last one, so therefore the video series will be much shorter, probably only a couple episodes, just simply because the premise and theme of this car is going to be much simpler than the Project Everyman. So again, all we're going to do is essentially compare and see if these cars can hold relevance in today's world and today's Mustangs, with just doing a simple modification and seeing if our price difference at the end will actually stack up to being half the price of a new Mustang. Alright, so let's go ahead and get the car in on the lift, and of course when we're done, we'll get it back here on the dyno, do a couple polls and see if our results where we want them to be. So let's go ahead and get started with Project Frostbite.